Trump held his speech to the joint sessions of Congress last night. Maybe you watched it. Basically just outlined what he has done so far in his administration and actually had 68, 70% approval ratings, even like over 60% on CNN. Now, look, we'll see what happens going forward. It seems that it was pretty large success on Trump's side, but there's a lot going on right now. Also, Attorney General Pam Bondi, she's now saying the Justice Department has found all those missing files on sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. They got him really quick. Now, these files were allegedly being withheld from the first release. They've now got them. In other news, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, he's ready for peace. He announced he's ready to sign the rare earths deal with the United States and be part of peace talks with Russia. And meanwhile, the House Judiciary Committee has released a report saying the policies to give illegal immigrants temporary protected status, that it worked as a type of de facto amnesty. And this is a scrutiny, this is something growing over illegal aliens and actually costing taxpayers a lot of money. I'll be talking more about these topics and more today, so let's jump into it. Now, first off, folks, the Department of Justice has recovered files on sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. There were allegedly thousands of them withheld. We did not get them. They now got them. The announcement was made by Attorney General Pam Bondi, who announced plans to make the Epstein files public. And the FBI, Department of Justice, had what they called, Phase 1. That was the document release last week. The files on that included Epstein's private contact list, some other information like flight logs. These were provided to a handful of conservative media personalities, but it was a bit of a dud. Many pointed out that much of the data was already public, and even public in a more complete form. They basically gave us redacted versions of stuff we already had. Now, some criticized the DOJ's release of just being, essentially giving us stuff that was official through official channels, and I mean they had to blank stuff out, right? The previous documents were made public by whistleblowers. They were technically leaked. And so this was significant because, this was now official. The government's actually releasing it. But the relatively weak release, it actually revealed something else. And I would say this was the biggest part that came from it. Attorney General Pam Bondi wrote to FBI Director Kash Patel, and she alleged many of the Epstein documents, thousands, had been withheld, allegedly, by the FBI office in New York. Why were they there? Now, this triggered an internal investigation, and now it appears that the Epstein documents have been recovered. They managed to find them, and we'll see what they do with them. Now, this is Attorney General Pam Bondi detailing what happened with this whole thing during an interview on Hannity with Fox News. Watch.
You're looking at these documents going, these aren't all the Epstein files. There were flight logs, there were names and victims' names. And we're going, where's the rest of the stuff? And that's what the FBI had turned over to us. And so a source said, whoa, all this evidence is sitting in the Southern District of New York. Yeah. So based on that, I gave them the deadline, Friday at 8, a truckload of evidence arrived. It's now in the possession of the FBI. Kash is going to get me and himself, really, a detailed report as to why all these documents and evidence had been withheld. And, we're going to go through it as fast as we can, but go through it very cautiously to protect all the victims of Epstein, because there are a lot of victims.
She goes on to explain they received thousands of documents, truckloads, they said. And FBI Director Kash Patel has assigned a team now to go through all these new documents. Pam Bondi also notes there are some important questions with this, like why did the Biden administration sit on these documents? Remember, Epstein died in his prison cell, allegedly by suicide during his term in office. Why were the documents in the Southern District of New York? Why did that happen? Well, Bondi says she wants a full report explaining all of this. Now, right alongside the investigation, something else also happened. As was noted, the documents were allegedly withheld. Somebody did that. They were being kept at the Southern District of New York. And Attorney General Pam Bondi was told by a whistleblower where the documents were. Somebody knew about it. That helped the Department of Justice recover the files. And right as this happens, something else happened. Suddenly, the head of the FBI field office in New York decided to resign. Maybe these are connected, maybe not. New York Post said this: the top FBI agent in New York was ousted Monday, saying he was not given any explanation for the decision from Washington. Out he goes, right? James Dennehy, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who joined the Bureau after the September 11 attacks, announced his forced resignation in a letter to staffers at the FBI's New York field office. He said, quote, "Late Friday, I was informed that I needed to put my retirement papers in today, which I just did. I was not given a reason for this decision," he wrote in the missive obtained by the New York Post. Now, notes that Dennehy apologized for the abruptness of his resignation in the letter, in which he called his colleagues an office of professionals who will always do the right thing for the right reasons. Hopefully the right thing was not withholding the Epstein documents, because it does seem that's why this happened, although, again, we don't know the details yet. Now, in terms of the Epstein files, the ones that have now been recovered, Pam Bondi says the plan is to make them public. They do plan to release them. She also noted that information is redacted. Remember, they'll release it, but they'll probably send you a striped sheet of paper, right? That's what they usually do. In this case, she's saying if they do redact information, they're going to tell the public why the information is being redacted. For example, if it's the name of a victim, they will say it. If it's information that needs to remain sealed for a grand jury, they will say it, suggesting there could be criminal charges. Or if there's other reasons, she is now saying that they will state the reasons and explain why they're doing that, if that happens. Now, folks, on another topic, peace is back on the table in Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced, just days after this whole fiasco, he is now ready to sign a rare earths mineral deal with the United States and be part of a peace talk with Russia. Now, this takes place just days after these deals fell apart on live TV. Zelenskyy got in an argument with President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance in the Oval Office. Now, here is what Zelenskyy is now saying in an official statement on X. He said, quote, "I would like to reiterate Ukraine's commitment to peace. None of us want an endless war. Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. My team and I are ready. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts." He said, "We are ready to work fast to end the war, and the first stages could be the release of prisoners and truce in the sky, ban on missiles, long-range drones, bombs on energy and other civilian infrastructure, and truce in the sea immediately, if Russia will do the same." Meaning we could have like a partial ceasefire, right? That's what he's saying. He said, quote, "Then we want to move very fast through all the next stages and to work with the U.S. to agree a strong final deal. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. And we remember the moment when things changed when President Trump provided Ukraine with javelins." That was part of Trump's discussion with Zelenskyy, by the way. He said, "Obama gave you blankets, I gave you javelins." That was Trump's statement, right? Now he continues saying, "We are grateful for this." He said, "Our meeting in Washington at the White House on Friday did not go the way it was supposed to be," Zelenskyy says. And he adds, "It is regrettable that it happened this way. It is time to make things right. We would like future cooperation and communication to be constructive. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it in any time and in any convenient format. We see this agreement," he says, "as a step towards security, greater security and solid security guarantees," meaning he's not getting off that security guarantee narrative. And he says, "and I truly hope it will work effectively." Now, on that point, Trump had said previously the United States is not going to sign the mineral deal unless it includes a peace deal. We're not going to go there for business and start this whole thing up and be in the middle of a shooting war. That's what Trump is saying. And look, despite all the drama, right, we got to watch it unfold in the Oval Office. Trump had also said that Zelenskyy would be welcomed back for these talks as soon as he is ready for peace, which he's now saying he is. Now, after all that, also, Zelenskyy had said that he wants peace, but he will not accept it without a long-term guarantee for peace. He said basically, they've been in this war since 2014. He's arguing Russia has previously violated its side. Russia says the same thing about them, so believe which side you want. But without a guarantee for peace, he says that nothing matters, that there's nothing solid in any document that's signed. Now, what does guarantee of peace mean? Well, that either means long-term military footprint of the United States in Ukraine. Trump says that's not going to happen. Or he wants NATO access, which Trump is also saying is not going to happen, because if they're going to maybe if they beat Russia, maybe if they win the war and Russia's coming as the loser, they can do that. But if they're trying to make a ceasefire in the middle of a war, that's a red line for Russia that'll trigger probably World War III. Now, Zelenskyy has said the war is very, very far from being over. It seems that has now changed. He said that just the other day. His statements now are very different. It looks like at the very least we could see the first stages of a peace deal. And he said he is ready to come back to the table and sign that peace deal at any time. And on that front as well, in addition to this, Trump's previous statements that European security will now be more on Europe, meaning, France, Germany, the UK, and so on. Well, that still seems to be on the table. Now, this was also part of the controversy also. Until now, the United States, we've been effectively subsidizing European defense and Canadian defense and a lot of other people's defense, both by covering most of their bills for NATO and by stationing U.S. troops all throughout the region. Now, Trump has said that the Russia-Ukraine peace deal, he wants Western Europe to be in charge of maintaining that, meaning instead of the United States having troops in Ukraine, you're going to have German troops and UK troops and whoever else. The United States will not keep a presence in Ukraine other than maybe on the business side with mining operations. And so this means that European countries, well, they need to start paying a lot more money for defense. Now, a deal along those lines is also now on the table. Newsweek said this: the European Union will free up $840 billion in funding to funnel into defense across the bloc. That's significant, by the way, because that's basically what America pays in terms of bills to NATO. That means that Europe basically is going to be paying the bills equal or even greater than what the United States currently pays to NATO, if they follow through with this. Now, it notes that European Commissioner Chief Ursula von der Leyen announced this on Tuesday. It says, dubbed Rearm Europe. The remarks from the European Commissioner's president came hours after President Donald Trump suspended all U.S. military aid to Ukraine, widening the gulf between Washington and Kiev, and going against the fresh commitments of support from Europe for Ukraine in recent days. Although, look, it's since changed, right? And he said, quote, I do not need to describe the grave nature of the threats that we face or the devastating consequences that we will have to endure if those threats would come to pass. All right, that's according to her, von der Leyen, telling this to reporters. Now, on that point, Germany might be bringing back compulsory military service. Good old draft in Germany. France and the UK, they're talking about stationing troops in Ukraine for security. There's also talk in the UK about bringing a military draft. Italy has said it will not bring its troops to Ukraine. It's saying, you all go ahead, I'm not going to do it. Look, that's probably going to be the problem that Europe faces, because essentially you have the UK, which is not really part of the European Union, but still part of NATO. The UK, Germany, and France, and kind of Italy pulling the weight of most of the region. You have a lot of other countries that their economies are not in a very good state, and they don't really pull their own weight. And so if they do require everybody to be part of this, it's Europe. You're going to have some who just say they're not going to do it. Now, folks, in other news, though, Trump's promised tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, they've now gone into effect. That's 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada, and an additional 10% tariff on top of the other one on goods from China. Now, this is in response to the role these countries have allegedly played in mass illegal immigration and to drug trafficking to the United States, including fentanyl, which Trump has repeated has killed around 100,000 Americans every year. There's different estimates on that. Some say 70,000 a year. Other estimates, Trump has said it may be much higher than that. Trump has said up to 300,000. But regardless, millions of Americans killed by these drugs. Now, the way it works, basically, the Chinese Communist Party supplies the precursor drugs, the synthetic drugs like fentanyl. The Mexican cartels, they run most of the operations on the ground, including through all their networks throughout the United States they've established. Thank you, mass illegal immigration. And then they do a lot of the money laundering through Canada. Also, because of the relatively unsecured Canadian border, a lot of the gangs have since moved their operations to Canada. Now, Canada says that they're not, one of the major countries responsible for this. The problem is they're now investigating it and they're finding big operations. But look, now here we are. We're going to be seeing what could be the start of a trade war. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a list of retaliatory tariffs on the United States. Have a look. He said this, quote, "The moment U.S. tariffs came into effect this morning, right, yesterday, so did the Canadian response." He says Canada will be implementing 25% tariffs against $155 billion of American products. We already traded a $300 billion deficit. He said starting with $30 billion worth of goods immediately and the remaining $125 billion in 21 days' time. The clock is ticking, America. Now, the Canadian government detailed this further in a public statement. It notes the efforts Canada has made as part of its 30-day deal. Remember, the tariffs were put on hold for a month with both Canada and Mexico. They say that basically was to help secure the border. They say they did their part. Now, Trudeau notes the Canadian government is, quote, active in ongoing discussions in provinces and territories to pursue several non-tariff measures while we urge the U.S. administration to reconsider their tariffs. Canada remains firm in standing up for our jobs, our economy, and our workers, and for a fair deal. Now, on the point of talking to different provinces about how to fight back against America on the economic front, this is important because Trump has been noting that the tariff-like activities against America, the unfair trade deals and so on, they're not limited to just official tariffs. He's noted that fines from Europe on American big tech work like tariffs. He's noted that other actions restricting American goods or American banks in Canada, for example, work like tariffs. And if Canada and Europe and everybody else does not want to allow equal access to America, well, we don't really need them, frankly. Economically at least. And so we have other options, a lot of them do not. That's the argument for the Trump side. Now, the Chinese Communist regime, they also responded against the United States with tariffs of up to 15% on some U.S. goods. That will include 50% tariffs on American chicken, wheat, corn, pork, dairy, and a long list of other U.S. agricultural products. They're mostly going after food products, it seems. Now, Trump had taken actions that could offset these in a recent move to tariff foreign food products overall, something he said will help balance the markets for U.S. farmers selling their goods domestically. In other words, look, we import a lot of food, we also export a lot of food. And Trump is saying basically that we buy all these foreign products, those are all going to be tariffed. And so what that means for domestic farmers is if they're having trouble selling their goods abroad, they're going to have a much easier time selling their goods domestically. The profit margins are going to go up quite a bit for them, and that's how he's kind of balancing this. Now, in response to all of this, though, Trump took to Truth Social. He's saying that if these countries, Canada, for example, place tariffs on the United States in response to these actions, Mexico's saying this weekend they're going to announce tariffs on the United States as well. Trump is saying the United States will also increase its tariffs. If Canada wants to put 25% additional tariffs on U.S. goods, maybe Trump is going to double the 25% tariffs to 50%. He's suggesting this. Now, this is part of his policies for reciprocal tariffs and equal trade deals, where he has noted America trades at a loss with almost every country on earth. He said other than 2 countries. He did not say who they are because he said they'll probably change those deals if they find out. We trade at a loss with literally all but like 2 countries on the face of the planet. Now, that includes Canada, Mexico, and China. And those days, he's saying, are over. We're no longer going to be doing that. We're going to be tariffing them if they tariff us. If they put penalties on American goods, we will match that with tariffs. And if we lose money in our trade deals, we will renegotiate those trade deals. He claims. We'll see if it works, because many point out that his renegotiation of NAFTA probably cost us more money than the original one. Now, Trump said this, though. He said, quote, "Please explain to Governor Trudeau," not Prime Minister Trudeau, he said Governor Trudeau, "of Canada, that when he puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariffs will immediately increase by a like amount, 25% additional if he does do that." Now, as I noted, Trump referred to Justin Trudeau as governor, not as Prime Minister of Canada. And look, that whole label, he's made it kind of a joke, but it's seemingly a real push to have Canada become the 51st state of the United States. And that whole thing started when this whole debate began. Trump first announced the plan for 25% tariffs, when he was again, after the elections, but before he was, again, appointed to president. Canadian leaders declared, if Trump does that, 25% tariffs, they say Canada will not survive as a country. They said 25% tariffs will destroy Canada. Trump's argument was that, well, if Canada cannot survive without America trading at a loss, if they can't survive without ripping us off, well, are they even a country? Maybe they could become the 51st state, and it'll be better for them. They'll have defense. They don't have to worry about defense. Better trade deals. They don't have to pay tariffs. He's saying, hey, it's a great thing. On that point, it's still not clear if Trump is joking. It seems that Canada is increasingly starting to think he's serious about it. I think he's getting increasingly serious as well. I don't know if he's joking anymore. But it is starting to really seem that this may be going through. But look, on that point, Trump has given these countries and others a way out. There is a way out from these massive tariffs. You don't have to destroy your country or destroy your economy. There is a solution. He is saying, if these countries do not want their goods to face tariffs, if they really cannot survive it, well, they have an option. They can move production within the United States. And this is actually important because even outside of this whole debate with Canada and so on, there were polls actually. A very large number of Canadian companies immediately began researching ways and looking into putting their businesses in the United States. And this would allow these Canadian companies or Mexican companies or whatever they are to basically stay in operation, still get taxed by their own country, but have operations here to avoid these very large tariffs. Now, Trump also repeated this offer in a Truth Social post, and here's what he said. He said, if companies move to the United States, there are no tariffs. American manufacturing and production could be making a comeback, in other words. Now, folks, on to a different topic. A new investigation has started into the death of George Floyd. The allegations that he was killed by police officer Derek Chauvin back in 2020, those were used to spark the BLM race riots that swept across the United States, causing billions of dollars in damage, murdering many people, burning down businesses, robbing people, beating people, and so forth for racial justice. Now, that all happened just in time for the 2020 elections, and at a time when most Americans were told you have to stay indoors because of COVID, unless you're rioting, right? An exception to the lockdowns was made for people wanting to protest and riot. I would question if people's lives were in danger. Why would they do that? Did they want to put these people's lives in danger, or was there no danger? I don't know. They let them riot, they let them protest when everybody else had a lockdown. That is what happened. But it now appears something else is happening. The whole case could get re-examined. A judge ruled in December that Derek Chauvin's legal team, the police officer, they're being allowed to analyze a tissue sample from George Floyd's heart to determine whether George Floyd died from a heart condition. Initial reports coming out, including the original reports on medical information, there were conflicting ones, did show that George Floyd had a lethal amount of fentanyl in his body. But again, we don't really know because there were conflicting reports. But now something else is happening. The Daily Wire has launched a campaign. They're requesting President Trump issue a pardon for Derek Chauvin. Now, this is the petition they've now launched to pardon. This is pardonderek.com. They have a website for it. And they say this: Dear President Trump, we write to urge you to immediately issue a pardon for Officer Derek Chauvin, who was unjustly convicted and is currently serving a 22.5-year sentence for the murder of George Floyd and associated federal charges. As you know, this was the inciting event for the BLM riots that caused $2 billion in property damage in cities across the United States and set America's race relations on their worst footing in recent memory. Yet the evidence demonstrates that Derek Chauvin did not murder George Floyd, according to Daily Wire, or Daily Caller, right? Sorry, Daily Wire. They say, quote, George Floyd was high on fentanyl. He had a significant pre-existing heart condition. He was saying he could not breathe before he was even out of the car. Derek Chauvin, for large segments of the widely circulated video of the encounter, had his knee on George Floyd's shoulder or back, not his neck, which was revealed in different camera angles, by the way. They say this was confirmed by the autopsy, which showed no damage to George Floyd's trachea. He said also, there was no accusation at trial that Derek Chauvin targeted Floyd for his race. Perhaps most significantly, there was massive overt pressure on the jury to retain a guilty verdict, regardless of the evidence or any semblance of impartial deliberation. This pressure took the form of threats, coercion, and intimidation. The mayor of Minneapolis prejudged the outcome of the trial and immediately issued a large settlement to the Floyd family. Then President Biden, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and others prejudged the outcome of the trial and took to the national media to create pressure on the jury to go along with their preferred narrative, which again was used to spark riots, which very likely impacted the elections. They say, quote, under these circumstances, there was no opportunity for blind justice to work, and a man is now rotting in prison because of it. They say, make no mistake, the Derek Chauvin conviction represents the defining achievement of the woke movement in American politics. The country cannot turn the page on that dark, divisive, and racist era without fighting this terrible wrong. And they say, thank you for your commitment to ending the weaponization of the American justice system. It's signed sincerely Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire and co-signers, which again, this is a petition, right? Now, we'll see whether this actually works or whether that actually happens even if it does work. A pardon from Trump would not affect the state charges. This would affect the federal charges. Derek Chauvin could still face charges at the state level or lawsuits or whatever else, right? A pardon would also affect Derek Chauvin's attempts to challenge the charges, which is also now happening. He's being given a chance to do that right now, in fact. But look, even without a pardon, the Daily Wire campaign could also help spark new investigations into the case. So maybe instead of pardoning him, the Trump administration might launch a re-examination of the evidence, for example. Or, well, why were there two different coronary reports? Why did the first one say he died of fentanyl, and then they started suing anybody who said that, and then the second one said that he died of, basically being murdered, right? Again, we don't really know because there's been no outside intervention or outside investigation on this. Now, folks, in other news, though, the House Judiciary Committee has released a report saying the policies to give illegal immigrants temporary protected status, or TPS, this worked as a type of de facto amnesty. Illegal immigrants were being granted amnesty through a legal workaround which might not have been legal. Now, this is as scrutiny grows over how much illegal immigrants are actually costing American taxpayers. I'll be talking about this more after we come back from a 1-minute break, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you're getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Illegal immigrants were granted a type of de facto amnesty under the Biden administration. This is now being uncovered. The House Judiciary Committee has released a report saying the policies that gave illegal immigrants temporary protected status, it's TPS, this worked as a type of de facto amnesty. Here's what they say in an official release. This is the House Judiciary Press. It says, what was intended by Congress to be a temporary status has become over time a permanent, automatically renewed designation, with some countries being designated for TPS, temporary protected service, for decades despite changed country conditions. Meaning, of course, that what was meant to be something to help a few individuals has been used on a massive scale and then used to facilitate mass illegal immigration to the United States under the guise of a legal system. And through this, again, basically being overblown and used to protect individuals who would otherwise be deported. It says this: the Biden-Harris administration vastly expanded this de facto amnesty to hundreds of thousands of new aliens, many of whom are in the country illegally and who entered the country during the Biden-Harris border crisis. It says further in, the majority of Venezuela and Haiti TPS recipients were not initially admitted pursuant to a valid visa. More than 95% of Venezuela TPS beneficiaries and 91% of Haiti TPS beneficiaries were illegally paroled into the country. The Biden administration was giving them parole, which let them get other benefits. It said enter the country without inspection, provided the U.S. government little or no information at all about the nature of their entry into the country or remain in the U.S., having filed an application to claim but are statistically unlikely to qualify for asylum. Meaning people who would not have been eligible for asylum were given asylum through a legal workaround. And again, probably exposed the United States to a lot of security problems because of the lack of proper oversight and investigation into who these people were. Now, as part of the program to give parole to illegal immigrants, that also opened the door for them to get social benefits, including welfare and other programs. A lot of things. Free houses, free food, some got free cars, and free medical care and everything else. It's also now being investigated how much that was costing American taxpayers. Even at the state level, it was a lot of money, let alone at the federal level. There were also various actions taking place to prevent this currently happening right now. Now, California, they're facing scrutiny because at the state level, it turns out California was spending $9.5 billion just to cover the medical costs for illegal immigrants. And that might not even be the whole breadth of it. It might even be more than that because they don't really keep track. In addition to that, Connecticut is being accused of spending around $1.3 billion on programs for illegal immigrants just over the course of 1 year. And there's other stuff too. Arizona, for example. There is now a proposal that would require the state to start asking people, what is your immigration status if they go to the hospital? That's including if they're in the United States illegally. Because what happens is people come to the U.S., they cross the border illegally, they check themselves into, usually the emergency rooms. Hospitals cannot legally deny people care if they do that, but they oftentimes skip out on the bills, go back to Mexico or wherever else, or just go into the country, and Americans have to shoulder the cost of that through higher premiums or through their taxes. Now, the policy on this could at the very least help the government keep track of how much money is being spent to pay the bills for illegal immigrants. And the question is, well, should this even be allowed? It's complicated because how can a hospital turn people away? Now, meanwhile, on a different topic, Over the last 4 years, some parents had disagreements with the school systems over their policies on race, gender, sexual education, and a whole lot of other things. Now, this saw issues like school boards requesting the FBI to investigate parents as terrorists because the terrorist parents were asking what their kids are being taught and were getting angry about it. That's what terrorists do, apparently. Now, this also saw many parents begin running for positions in the school boards. You actually saw kind of a grassroots movement, and a lot of parents actually kind of took back their schools. And as things currently stand, well, Trump has now signed an executive order to get rid of many of the gender and race policies that kind of define that whole era. And they're arguing DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion itself could be a violation of constitutional civil rights if the policies result in types of reverse discrimination. For example, if the school was teaching that white people are evil, or if they denied access to white people, or discriminated against white people or Asians, which these policies basically did on a running basis. Look, white people are a race, even though if you've been told something otherwise. Asians are a race, right? If you discriminate against them, that does violate the civil rights of these individuals if you do it through the government, including through schools. Now, there are also some allegations that school systems are finding ways around this to try to hide the policies. Discriminating against kids based on their gender, evil white male. Discriminating against kids based on their maybe sexual preference, if they're straight mostly. And if they do that, well, it's illegal now. But now something else has been happening. A program has been launched that will allow parents, students, or any whistleblower to report if there is any form of DEI propaganda or discrimination taking place. And this is the official portal now launched from the U.S. Department of Education. You can see this portal if you visit enddei.ed.gov. That's enddei.ed.gov. And this is the official portal now to report this. It says schools should be focused on learning. The U.S. Department of Education is committed to ensuring all students have access to meaningful learning free of divisive ideologies and indoctrination, meaning political indoctrination and things like that, in addition to possible discrimination. They say this submission form is an outlet for students, parents, teachers, and the broader community, meaning if you just know about it, you can report it, to, quote, report illegal, discriminatory practices at institutions of learning. The Department of Education will utilize community submissions to identify potential areas for investigation. Now, that portal, it basically asks for information like, the person filing the report, what's your contact information, which school is engaging in the practices that may be in violation of these policies. And it also includes a section asking to, quote, please describe in as much detail as possible the discriminatory practice taking place. And so Americans are now being given the power to take this into their own hands. You don't have to go protest at the school board meetings anymore. Maybe you still want to. Maybe you won't be labeled as a terrorist now if you do. But there are other options. For example, just going here and filing a complaint. Now, the program could create an additional layer of scrutiny as well. It gives a voice to parents and students and educators and union members and whoever else who may still be dealing with these types of policies. And folks, this move also comes after Trump's pick to lead the Department of Education, that's Linda McMahon, was confirmed by the Senate on Monday. This is now happening. And during confirmation hearings, McMahon stated she supports universal school choice and would enforce Trump's executive orders to remove DEI programs from both K-12 and higher education. So maybe we will see more changes to the education system in America down the line. We will see. As said, everyone, hit the like button, leave a comment. Let's jump into some questions. All right, first question. This is from realityisreal.com. Canada will lose in a trade war with Trump. We hold all the cards. Yeah, and I mean, Canada, this is back again to the Trump putting tariffs on Canada, 25%, Canada matching that now with their own tariffs. A lot of it's to like food products, so like milk. There's some minerals on there and stuff, but they put like 190-something% tariff on milk, right? So you're saying, we hold all the cards, meaning the U.S. Well, I mean, the problem Canada has is they basically admitted this already. Like, they already said it. Look, if you're playing poker, right? You're playing cards, you're gambling with your country's future, right? The little chip on the table is Canada, the other chip is America. Trump's on one side, you're on the other, right? You're Justin Trudeau. You're looking at your cards and you're like, well, I don't got a lot of cards here, but let me just tell you something. I cannot survive this. I'm going to lose. I am going to lose. I'm telling you right now. And then you want to play cards still? That's what Canada did. Before any of this happened, Justin Trudeau personally visited Trump in Mar-a-Lago. And the public statements from Canada was that 25% tariffs will destroy Canada. They were saying that they will not survive as a country if they face 25% tariffs. They already said that. Now, what does that tell you with a trade deal? Have any of you ever been in like a business negotiation? What do you think happens if you tell people, I'm not going to survive this, I'm going to go out of business if you do this to me, and then you want to play the tough guy after that and be like, okay, I'm gonna hit you right back, and then the other guy's, all right, fine, I'll double it, double the deal. Who's going to win? Who do you think is going to win? That is literally where the negotiations are right now. That's literally where they are. Now, how does Trump do business, right? How does Trump do business? I've read his books, of course, but I've watched how he does it. He likes to put pressure on people. He lets them feel it, right? And so he's like, all right, we're doing it. Bam, day one, 25% tariffs. This is the end, buddy. Hope you had a good time. This is the end, right? He lets you feel it. Then he takes it off. Now, what the effect of that is this. Then he negotiates. The effect of that is this. When he puts the pressure on, that forces the individual or the country in this case, or the business, that forces them to evaluate what will the impact be of this? What's going to happen to us? Well, the first time Trump threatened this, what happened? Canada freaked out. They said, we will not survive as a country. Trudeau flew down to Mar-a-Lago, met with Trump, negotiated it. Trump said, well, you can become the 51st state governor. Head back to your 51st state and enjoy the rest of your time. And then remember, after that, there was a political crisis in Canada, and Trudeau looks like he's going to get ousted by his own party. Although it's changing a bit now because I think Canadians, some of them are relatively happy with the way he's doing things, at least among his party. Now, then what happened? Trump put the pressure on, then he released the pressure. 30 days, folks. You get 30 days, start figuring things out, right? And so what does Canada do? Well, they start launching border security programs. They declare the Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations. They actually start raiding people. They actually do start doing some operations. They uncovered a very large, what was allegedly the largest fentanyl lab ever discovered, and it was in Canada, go figure. And it was also tied to an assassination ring. Remember, we covered that recently. So they did do some things. Then Trump says, well, 30 days up, back on, right? Now, Canada's given two ways out. They're given two ways out. Option one, well, they can become the 51st state of the United States. They don't really want to do that. Alberta is saying they might do it. Alberta is kind of like the Texas of Canada. I'd take Alberta. Right? If anyone from Alberta is watching, right, you guys are welcome. Come on in. Alberta, I'd say, is probably more aligned with American values. Alberta wants to meet with Trump. They want to become part of America. But the rest of Canada, maybe not so much. Alberta is like a Western Central Canada, right? That's happening. Option two, what's their option two? Option two is they move business back to America. Personally, I think that's why Trump is doing this. Because what happened with NAFTA? This is my personal take, why did Trump's renegotiations of NAFTA not really work? I know people who lost their businesses because of NAFTA, right? The North American Trade Agreement, right? That basically what it did when NAFTA was signed, it sent a lot of American businesses to Canada and Mexico. That was one of the main reasons why America lost its manufacturing industry. You know, a lot of people point to China, right? They say, well, what happened to American manufacturing is all the jobs went to China. That's partly true, but actually a lot of them went to Canada and Mexico. And that was because of NAFTA. Now, when Trump tried renegotiating NAFTA, it didn't really work, frankly. If you look at the numbers, it was kind of worse, to be honest. If you just go purely by the numbers, you could blame other stuff. You could blame COVID and economic shutdown and everything else for why it cost so much. But many people would suggest, and I would say also, that Trump's renegotiating of NAFTA did not work. How do you make it work? You need to bring those businesses that left back to the United States. How do you do that? Well, how do you make a business move? It's not easy to move a business. Even if you face a lot of problems, even if taxes are high, it's such a hassle to move a business because you got to think you got to fire everyone, right? Or move people. You have to rebuild everything. You have to reestablish. You have to reestablish all your logistics. It's really not easy to move a business. You're not going to move a business unless really things get really bad or unless you're forced to. What is now happening with Canada? Well, a lot of these businesses, 25% on tariffs. If you understand profit margins for business, 25% is a lot of money. That's a lot of money. A lot of them are not going to be able to stay in business if they have to pay an additional 25%, right? If 25% has to come off, the icing on the top, that's a lot of icing. A lot of them will not survive. So what's the option? Well, they can move to America and then they don't have to pay it. And that's what a lot of them are doing right now. I personally think that's what Trump is doing. I personally think Trump is trying to undo the damage to American manufacturing that was caused by NAFTA. Personally, I believe that's what he's up to. And I think the talk about, hey, become a state, offers on the table. Maybe he's serious about it. I don't know. Politically, it wouldn't be a very smart move. You talk about bringing in 10 million people to rig elections. Canada would make it so Republicans probably never win another election, folks. It wouldn't be in Trump's political interest. But if you bring American business back, that's a fantastic thing. And I think proposing something really extreme makes the other thing that would normally seem extreme not as extreme. You see what I mean? He redefined the breadth of the debate. Hey, move all your businesses back to America. That's an extreme statement. Hey, undo everything that was done under NAFTA. They're not going to do that. That's really a very extreme statement. But if you tell somebody, hey, let us conquer your entire country and become part of America and get rid of your constitution and your judicial system and your political system and make all of your people American citizens and, just do it. Or, move your businesses here. Which sounds more extreme, right? This comparatively starts sounding a lot less extreme. And that's, in my opinion, how Trump is making this business deal. I think this is the goal. My personal take on it. Jen Reinbold, you're saying, you cannot out-business Trump. Trump is very good at making business deals. I think even people who might have problems with him, I don't think you can deny that he's doing pretty dang good with business. On that point too, I did watch Trump's statement to the joint Assembly of Congress. last night. Maybe some of you watched that. I mean, basically, he just, it's kind of like you just go over what has been done by your administration so far. So Trump has done a lot in this last month. He detailed all of his executive orders. He brought out the family of like Lake and Riley, again, who was the girl who was murdered by that Venezuelan gang member who was put up in a fancy hotel paid by your tax dollars in New York. He brought them out. It was a lot of stuff like that. Now, Democrats, they had a pink protest. Some of them wore pink as a way of protest. There was a viral video that went out where I believe it was like 22 Democrat senators. They had published videos criticizing Donald Trump, and that became kind of a scandal because they all read the exact same script and the videos were edited in almost the exact same way. And a lot of Republicans were joking about it because they were like, you guys didn't even change the script from one person to the next. Maybe that was a clever marketing campaign by the Democrats because it did bring a lot of attention to them. Maybe it brought the wrong kind of attention, you decide. But on the point of the actual event, Republicans seem to be overwhelmingly in support of Trump. On the Democrat side, you had one guy get kicked out because he was, basically interrupting Trump's speech. One of the Democrat members of Congress got booted out. Other than that, there were mixed responses from the Democrats. I did see some of them applauding Trump. It wasn't like, black and white. You did have some. For the most part, they were in silent protest. You did have some of them calling things out. That's just how it was. When Biden was president, Republicans did the same thing. But on that point, the biggest part that came out from it, I think, was the polls. Polling data showed that Trump had about a 70% approval positive on his speech last night. That's pretty dang significant. I believe the CNN poll was even like 68% support. And CNN does have more of a Democrat base. 68% support, right? Or it was around that. I don't remember the exact number. But that's pretty dang high. And so that's how that went. Another question here. Joy Miller. You're saying the Iowa legislature recently eliminated gender identity from its civil rights. Explain the impact of such moves, and are other states making similar moves? Okay, so this is a bit complicated. Somebody mentioned Al Green. Al Green, I believe, was the one booted. Okay. So Iowa, you're saying the state legislature eliminated gender identity from its civil rights. This is complicated because this is how gender has been reinterpreted in the United States. What is the difference, folks, between gender and gender identity? Gender is physical. Male and female is in your chromosomes, it's in your DNA, it's in your brain. Men and women actually, the male brain and the female brain are very different. This is aside from like our differences in our bodies, which are obviously very different. Some people argue that just by changing the body, you can make a man into a woman or a woman into a man. Others would argue it's deeper than that. Gender is in your brain, it's in your blood, it's in your bones. Even the pelvic structure, the physical structure, the hips, the shoulders, men and women are different. They're very different, in case you didn't know. The way we think is really different, like really different. Women are better at like multitasking. Guys, they can only kind of focus on like one thing. There's a lot of differences between us. Emotionally, we're a little different, right? There's a lot of differences between us. Gender is physical. Gender is rooted in all these things. But there are some people who argue that you should not define gender as physical gender. You should define gender as gender identity. And that was the whole thing we saw over the last 4 years. I'd say it actually started under Obama, right? A lot of the trans stuff really started under Obama. And so what they started doing was redefining gender as gender identity. So if a person identifies as whatever, male or female, or, they started making up all these other things. Like if you only feel attracted to somebody if you're in love with them, they called that a gender. I'd call that a normal, healthy relationship, personally. But they called that a gender. If you think you're a tree, that's a gender. If you believe you have multiple personalities, you're massively schizophrenic, that's a gender. If you identify as an animal, that's a gender, right? If you believe in gender identity. Now, they initially defined like over 70 genders. Then they made even more. Then some argued there were infinite amounts of genders, because who's to say what a person can't come up with in their imaginations? The number of genders is as broad as the human imagination is capable of. You can identify as anything, and you are that thing. That's what gender identity did. Now, look, hey, you be you. I don't really care, right? You do you. If you all want to identify as anything you want, I support you. I'm not going to acknowledge it. You're not going to force me to say it, but look, I don't really care what a person decides to believe. Right? You do you. The problem is when you start embedding that in law, and that is what gender identity politics started doing. And that is when you get into the way that they started reinterpreting even, what you can be criminally charged with. Because as soon as you make this a civil right, when you change, gender in civil rights laws from being gender to gender identity, that then means that if you discriminate against a person for whatever they think they are, that you can be criminally charged. And that's when you start getting to some really crazy things. That's when you get people being like, "Hello, sir." And the person's like, "Did you just call me sir?" And it's like a big Hercules-looking man. "Did you just call me sir?" And then next thing you know, they're trying to sue you. And you're like, "Geez, I'm just trying to be nice. How was I going to know this?" You know what I mean? You start dealing with those things. And so you do have states trying to pull that out of their law. Now, the Biden administration, right before Biden left office, actually did try passing a constitutional amendment which embeds this in the Constitution. Now, many people argued that Biden bypassed a lot of the normal laws on how you create a constitutional amendment. I think Trump is going to have to address that eventually, or the Supreme Court will. But they did try to do that. And at the very least at the state level, even though things are changing, mainly through Trump's executive orders, an executive order is not that solid. You actually have to change things at the legal level and, through Congress and at the state level. And so, yes, a lot of these things are changing, but it's not done yet. You actually have to change it in law. Otherwise, what's going to happen? Well, Let's imagine, Mr. Hercules runs for president in 2028, and this Hercules-looking individual decides that all of Trump's executive orders should go away on day one. All that Zur has to do is sign it, and all of Trump's executive orders disappear. A vague memory that never happened, right? Just a bad dream for all these individuals. And it's as simple as that. Everything he did through executive order is gone. And that means they of course, need to put it in law. They need to go through Congress. They need to go through that whole process and actually change it in law if it is going to be changed. In the meantime, it's going to be debated legally because you probably will have people suing and stuff like that. And that's where we are as a country right now. So Iowa doing this, that's a big thing, right? On that point, I joke with my daughter about this. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I think the best way to deal with these things is you don't avoid talking about it. You have to tell your kids about it, but we kind of make it funny. So we used to like make up pronouns for each other, you know, joke about it. I very much embarrassed her in public recently. All right, I'll tell you my joke. I told my daughter that I now identify as an alpha male, and so I can't have pronouns anymore. I can only have bronouns. And she did the teenager thing where she took her hood and just pulled it over her face. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, Dad." Anyways, folks, another question here. James K. You're saying, gee, if you take a firm stance with Ukraine, good things could happen. Imagine that, right? Imagine that. Anyways. Yeah, so back to Ukraine, right? It is interesting what happened because, look, honestly, a lot of people were criticizing Trump. They said, look, you almost had a peace deal. You brought a foreign leader to your office. You know the peace deal they had in the Oval Office, it was this close to happening. The whole thing that a lot of people watched, where like the debates fell apart, that was the very last question. They were doing a press conference, Zelenskyy, Trump, and Vance. They were doing a press conference at the Oval Office. Everything was fine and dandy. The big argument that a lot of people watched was the very last question. And what happened was they were answering it and then started kind of cross-examining each other. People say J.D. Vance kind of questioned Zelenskyy, and then the whole thing fell apart. They were talking over each other. They started yelling a little bit. Zelenskyy maybe said some nasty words under his breath to J.D. Vance. Many people did report that. I won't repeat it. And that's what happened. Now, a lot of people criticized Trump and Vance, saying that they instigated it, maybe they pre-planned it. That was the allegation. On the Republican side, they came out and they said, no, what you saw on camera was a continuation of what happened off camera. And they were saying that basically the Democrats had talked with Zelenskyy, encouraged him to reject the minerals deal. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if that's actually true, but that was the allegation. And that, Zelenskyy basically did not want the deal. Now, afterwards, Zelensky's statements did seem to reflect that. He did say that he wants the deal, but he wants a security guarantee, a long-term security guarantee, and he would not accept the terms without it. Meaning, it did seem that he was going to reject the deal based on his public statements. And then he went to Europe, and Europe's like, we don't need America. And then they were like, we need America. Actually, we do need America. Change our minds. America, please come back. We need your money and your guns, please. That happened very quickly. It literally lasted like 2 days before they came to terms with that. And then what happened? Well, as I just showed you today, yesterday, Zelenskyy came out and said, okay, I'm ready for a deal. Let's sign it. It's easy to talk about these things on the surface, but I was thinking about it. Imagine being a troop. Imagine being one of these guys. Have you seen the videos where they have a guy out walking his dog, in Ukraine, or in Russia you've had the same thing. You're out walking your dog, all of a sudden a van pulls up and a soldier grabs you, throws you in the back of the truck, kind of beats you around a little bit. Abandon your dog. And then next thing you know, you're getting sent to the front lines to what is really just a giant meat grinder. This is a horrible war. I could not imagine being stuck in a war like that. Look, I'm a good shot. I'm very good with guns. I grew up with guns. My grandfather, retired Marine, he was on the U.S. pistol team. He's one of the best shots in the Marine Corps. He was on the pistol team. He taught my dad how to shoot. My dad taught me how to shoot. I've had a gun. I had guns when I was a little kid. I think I learned to shoot when I was probably 5 years old or something like that. I'm good with them, right? I would like to think if I had to go to war, I'd do okay. That war is different. You can be the greatest shot in the world. You can be the best soldier on the face of the planet. But you get a drone flying over your head with infrared vision, and just drops a bomb on your head, nobody's going to fight against that. And that's what these kids are dealing with. And they're you know, like, they're kids. When I see 18-year-olds these days, they look like kids to me. Those are kids. You know, my daughter's 15, right? Like, you know, these are kids. And you got to think, if you have, I don't know, I've heard different estimates on how many of them are dying every day in that terrible war. But I couldn't imagine if you are one of those people, or if you have family members or your own kid is in that situation, and every single day, thousands and thousands of them are getting killed, basically for no reason, as far as I'm concerned, or for little reason. You know, it's terrible, right? And so if you, I imagine that in those few days between a peace deal being rejected and this being brought back out, your kid got killed. How would you feel? I would feel terrible. And so, you know, every day that deal is not signed, you know, there are people dying for it. And what a pointless death, right? I often think about wars where, you know, you hear there's like an armistice or whatever, or like a peace deal that gets made, and you have someone who gets killed like a minute before it is signed, or like right before it. What a terrible death, right? Anyways, I feel really terrible for the people there. Now, again, I've made my stance clear. I'm not taking sides with wars. In my opinion, the reason wars happen is because people can't come to an agreement on something. Diplomacy has failed. Both sides usually have their own arguments, or they would not be going to war in the first place. And as a journalist, I don't think it's my place to tell you one side is right and one is wrong, usually, right? If they're like, you know, terrorists, you know, then that's a different story. But, you know, for the most part, right? Or communists. But hey, you know, terrorists and communists are the same thing, right? So, another question here. James K., you're saying, gee, if you take a firm stance with Ukraine, oh yeah, we read that. Ashley from California, you're saying besides DEI, schools need to recognize sex and respect sex differences. No schools letting boys play on girls' teams and vice versa. I would agree. Because, you know, you have, okay, I'll tell you a story from my wife. My wife, she's in her mind, she's massive. She's like, in her mind, she's like a 6'5", you know, tough person. In reality, she's very short. She's very tiny, right? You know, she's older than me, but you know, she's small. She's of small stature. When she was in college, When she was in college, she decided to play rugby, and she decided to play rugby in a team that involved both men and women. She did that for one day, and the reason she did that for one day was because when she was playing rugby, a grown man like checked her, and she just went flying, right? And then she was like, you know what? I like this game. I don't like this game that much. You know? Look, you know, there are great women athletes. I like my daughter did martial arts for a while. You know, we're trying to find another school for her right now. I think it's good for girls to get into sports. You know, I do think it's good, but you know, there are differences in the strength of men and women. You know, I remember talking to a young girl who was, you know, she was on a swim team, and you know, she was kind of having trouble because she wanted to apply for the Olympics, and she was dealing with this fact that, I mean, she pushed herself. She was on top of her game. She trained like crazy. And then she dealt with the reality that, you know, men who basically put in half the effort were beating her. And she's like, man, this isn't fair. You know what I mean? She said, this isn't fair. It's a physical reality that, you know, men just because of testosterone and muscle mass. It's just easier for us. That is our strength. Women have their strengths as well, but physical strength, it's easier for men. It's easy. They're bigger, they're stronger by nature. And a woman has to work 2 times, 3 times, 4 times as hard to compete with guys who might not even push themselves that hard. And that's why you have in sports these guys who, would not even make it in a lot of the men's sports, going into women's sports and just decimating them. It's because they're physically they do have an advantage. It is an unfortunate reality. That is just an unfortunate reality. And I know because of a lot of politics, a lot of women, they don't like to talk about that. I believe women have their own strengths. My wife, she's a big fan of the virtues of women. She would recommend actually a few books, those women out there curious. What is it called? Fascinating Womanhood, she really liked. There was The Alpha Woman's Guide to Love and Marriage, she really liked. A book that very much improved my quality of life, by the way, by extension. And, there are some great books out there for women, basically teaching how to use the virtues of women to their advantage. But strength is something that they do lack. And so you do have this, though. There are girls that just get beat up by these guys. If you look at like the boxing matches, you get girls getting concussions. You get girls getting seriously injured, right? Getting like traumatic brain injury because they're letting men compete in their sports. Now, I don't think that's nice to anybody. I don't think it's nice giving these guys, participation trophies. I don't think it's nice to let these girls be injured. I don't think it's nice because basically this is destroying women's sports. The entire reason you have different sports leagues for girls and boys is because you don't want the girls getting injured. If you let men compete with them, you will destroy women's sports. You will destroy it. You'll have a lot of girls not do it because it's too dangerous and because there's no advantage to them. A lot of girls, in high school and stuff, they get into sports because they want scholarships. They want it for their educations. They want it because they need to get physically active. And if that means going out there and getting beat up by men, like who wants to do that? There were other sides to this. When I was in high school, I knew one guy who joined the cheerleading team, and we all made fun of him. But he turned out to be the smartest guy around because his argument was, everyone made fun of him. You're going to be a cheerleader, ha, ha, ha. He goes, no, boys, you watch and see. And sure enough, that guy got more attention from girls than probably all the guys put together. You know what I mean? There's other exceptions to this. But physically competing, that's a whole different game. And so, yeah, I disagree with this, right? I don't think it's healthy for girls, and I don't think it's very nice to them. And so I do think even for the safety of girls, you can't let, maybe cheerleading is okay, but maybe this other stuff, I don't know about it. All right, everyone, that said, thank you so much for being here. Join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I always enjoy talking with you all. Please share this video, give us a like, it helps us quite a bit. Tell a friend or family member about Crossroads. And folks, that said, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.